Conversations across time. Conversations across time.
Hi, I'm Mark Hoffman, proud member of the Conversations Across Time family and a retired history teacher. These are the times that try men's soul. These words were written by Thomas Paine, the character I play on this evening's show. They were written to rally the colonists against the tyranny of George III of England. Also on the panel with me tonight are Spartacus, the slave gladiator who organized the revolt against imperial Rome; Ida B. Wells, the African-American journalist who fought for women's rights and was instrumental in getting anti-lynching laws passed in the United States; and Horace Greeley, the founder and editor of the New York Tribune, whose abolitionist editorials led to the passage of the 13th Amendment and the end of slavery. Tonight's show deals with tyranny, fascism, and the culpability of the press in allowing these tyrannical forms of government to rise up in our country. Stay tuned for an educational and provocative show.
We ended last week with Mr. Paine discussing what is presently happening in our country. Thomas Paine was a man who was able to push a reluctant colonial government towards revolution. The question is that now necessary? And what is the media doing to make certain that the citizenry have information? Mr. Greeley talks about the decline in the number of newspapers. That's exactly what is going on now. Most major metropolitan areas have one daily news source. This is tragic. And that is why the work of Miss Ida B. Wells is so important, because Ida B. Wells was a voice reporting exactly what was going on with lynching, with the horrors of lynching. And that was because she took it upon herself to support this nation knowing exactly what was going on. And she did this in peril of her own life.
His surrogates, he himself sets ground rules down for when the press interviews him, that you can't ask these questions. Why can't the press say, this is illegitimate, this is bogus, this is a lie? We won't talk about it. If you bring it up, we're going to cut you off.
This is ridiculous. You can't expect to fight the truth, to fight lies with the truth. And you keep talking about this is a lie, this
then
is
we're
false.
doomed.
Then we're doomed.
Well, I have a question for you.
Well, I think my work here is done.
Were you not?
Because we said we're doomed?
Because we're doomed?
Well, you are a prima donna, Mr. Spartacus.
If we're doomed, I'm going to go back to camp and find some more hats.
Yes, but here's the point. I understand his rage. See, that's the problem. I get the rage.
I can comprehend Mr. Spartacus's anger too, Ms. Crawford. It seems to me that we have, with all this sophisticated commercial media, we've reverted back to when I started my career with the celebrity scandal and the quack medicines, including the quack theories about Mr. Obama's parentage. And religion. We're going, yes, and religion else. And nationality, and it's like we've gone backward.
Mr. Greeley and Ms. Wells and myself, we would not stoop as journalists, as pamphleteers, as editors of publications, we would not stoop to doing the things that some of the right-wing papers do, or right-wing media sites do, or some of our cable networks do. I won't mention any name of a network, but it's the name of an animal that's very sly. So the problem is, if we wanted to do the same thing, for example, I could write a pamphlet talking about President, I shouldn't call him President, Donald Trump's parentage, because if I wanted to do the same kind of scandaling that he did vis-a-vis President Obama. I would say he's the illegitimate son of Ayn Rand and Gordon Gekko.
Oh,
So
wait a
we
minute.
could
Let me
start
just
that
wrap
whole.
my brain around that.
Wait,
I love it.
What did Bill Maher say? He was the son of an orangutan.
Oh, well, he sued
And
Bill
then he-
Maher for that.
Yes, he did, but I am really grateful that the orangutans didn't sue him for that.
I would concur, Mr. Paine.
But we could do that.
must-
We could resort to the same type of journalism, but our integrity, Miss Wells, yours and mine, would not allow us to do it. So we have to fight this with integrity, honesty, but point out. We have to be independent, and I think that's the problem. The press is more interested in the corporate money and their ratings than they are on true
Well,
journalism.
then
I
we
concur.
have to, as people, we are the people, we have to figure out if we have to boycott various press instruments, we should think about doing that.
Well, wait a minute.
That's the bottom line,
But
right?
here's my problem with that. When we talk about boycotting press outlets, I stopped watching MSNBC in the morning. From 7 to 9, I refused to turn it on. And here they were giving this man free airtime. Every time he called in, they listened to what he had to say. They treated him with kid gloves. The man was lying then. He's lying now. And just as Ms. Wells said, everything that he's doing, he said he was going to do. He said he was gonna do.
Today's press is intimidated. Miss Wells wasn't intimidated. Mr. Greeley wasn't intimidated. I wasn't intimidated. I'm sure they wreaked havoc. They threatened their establishments. The press today is intimidated. They want to know who's going to get called first in the press conference, and they get PO'd if they're not called first because they get brownie points with their networks if they're called first. And that shouldn't be the issue at all. The issue should be, I want to ask follow-up questions. And we got to stick together.
Do we get
also
one
have to-
question on climate change?
Right. That's that's
Do
exactly.
we get one?
And,
Maybe one.
And they're afraid. It should be the other way around. The
Yes.
people in power should
Should
be
be afraid of
fearful
the
of the
press.
press, not the
Let me
press
ask you a
fearful of the
Ms. Wells,
people in power.
You
That's
were
right.
getting ready to interject something. As a publisher, how does this strike you?
It's very upsetting.
Because you did this at the peril. Your reporting was done
Right.
at peril to your
To your
physical.
life, to your life.
You
Yes.
had to escape towns when you reported.
And it seems that when it comes to the press, now, even though I had to fight to use my pen, I had to fight to get these messages out, I had to run in order to get my message out. Now we're in a situation and we're in a society that, because they're not fighting to make sure that they constantly get that information out, they don't even have a seat at the table anymore.
But
Because even though they never challenged him, the press never challenged him, the press never called him a liar, the press they gave him all of this airtime.
And didn't report news that they knew.
And did not report the news accurately. But now, so maybe if they would have done that proper reporting in the beginning, then we would have a president that would not be doing and committing all these atrocities.
I asked our audience, and just to think about this, think of any TV commentator, any newspaper reporter that you read that has today the integrity of Miss Wells or
Some columnists.
Mr. Greeley or myself. There's very few.
There's
And as
Charles
Ms. Wells
Envelope.
said, the reporters who are complaining now dug their own graves by not holding all the candidates. And Donald Trump is the most blatant, but all their feet to the fire. And the first time that he really cracks down on the press, we have his chief advisor, Steve Bannon saying the press should shut up. We have his other advisor, Kellyanne Conway.
Who is a white supremacist
Right.
and a white nationalist and an anti-Semite, and on and on. He's one of the, and he can concentrate, unlike the president. He's really dangerous.
How is it?
But Kellyanne Conway said all reporters that reported negatively about candidate Trump should all be fired now.
And there's still three guys in jail, right?
Right,
For
there's 3 reporters
nothing.
in jail for covering the women's protest march.
They were arrested while they were reporting.
So we know that one of the I shouldn't say standard bearers because I don't want anything to stand up for fascism, but one of the things that fascist dictators, tyrants do is squash the press. And we know that the current administration is trying to squash the press. In fact, I think they're trying to convert the Voice of America, which was funded by Congress and had congressional approval for it.
And
Who worked on
bipartisan,
it.
it was bipartisan.
Right, and was bipartisan that broadcast the United States message of freedom and equality and all the things we're supposed to stand for to foreign countries. And it was created when we had the Cold War that was supposed to be broadcast into the Iron Curtain countries, has now been co-opted by the current administration. And now the president has the right to appoint the people without congressional approval, and now they're allowed to broadcast domestically. And Donald Trump just appointed the 2 administrators directly from him, people who come from Breitbart News and are all right.
Now
That's the true danger.
Here's the point. That's one of the elements. And for our audience, you see the screen. That's one of the elements of fascism. One of the elements, you suppress the press, and you also have your own vehicle to distribute falsehood, to distribute false information. And what's interesting, I mentioned earlier in an earlier episode in this series about Edward R. Murrow. Do you know that the first director of Voices of America was Edward R. Murrow?
Yes.
I mean, think about what we have deteriorated, what we've descended to. We've got these 2 people from the alt-right who are now running Voices of America, and that's the mantle that was put in place by Edward R. Murrow, who was dedicated to journalism and the notion that journalism had a responsibility, as you said, Ms. Wells. It galls me. It galls me that this has happened, but guess what? He hasn't done anything that he didn't say he would do. But what's interesting about Voices of America to me is that they put that in place when President Obama, they stripped Voices of America and made it to be broadcast domestically under President Obama. And you know how they did it? Because President Obama was upset about it, but he had to sign it because they put it in the defense budget.
Right.
In the defense budget.
I also want to mention that when we talk about the media, we also have to take into account that this isn't the first time that the media has failed us. And the media has failed us since the beginning of time, because for example, let's take a lot of the movements that are happening right now. There's a lot of them, I won't name all of them, but you have to realize, like, what is it that the media is reporting and not reporting? Because when it comes to certain movements, when it comes to certain communities, the media only reports what's negative about certain certain members of society. They never report what's positive about those groups and societies. So media has always been irresponsible in their reporting. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that.
That's true, but there have been
much more things
there have been individual reporters, you as an editor, Greeley, myself going way back, who stood up to the pressures of not reporting everything, or as you say, not being objective, being subjective throughout history. Now, you're quite correct. Throughout even our history in the United States, even going back to my time, of course I was in France when this happened, they passed the Alien and Sedition Act. So any newspaper editor that printed anything detrimental to John Adams could be locked up. That might happen again, they'll just fit it another way. Alien and Sedition, suppress freedom of the press, suppress immigration.
Yeah, yeah.
Same thing going on right now.
And
Same
the
thing going on.
Yes, and the phrase objective.
During slavery, Congress passed a rule called the gag order. They weren't allowed to debate slavery on the Senate or the House floor because it was too incendiary. So throughout our history, we had the Espionage Act during World War One. That I think Ms. Crawford, you also did a show on that with Justice Holmes about clear and present danger. If it represented a clear and present danger, and if our society evolved in that, and I'd like to point out that Ms. Crawford pointed out about the war protest over Vietnam in the 60s and the 70s. Well, I want you to know that the government was going to use the Espionage Act and my ruling to put some of those anti-war protesters in jail and using the same ruling. So what we're saying is, what is more important? And this is the age-old law and philosophical question: security or freedom? And where do we draw in the law?
Maybe what we're saying is what's more important: the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, or some bill that's passed by Congress or a state legislature.
It's not.
Well said.
It's not absolute. The First Amendment was never intended to be absolute. It's not absolute.
It's a shame, I know.
Well, you could say we have the whole thing with Watergate. Nixon started with.
You skipped over interring the Japanese.
Interring the Japanese,
During the
McCarthyism.
Second World War,
We have McCarthyism where
they let McCarthy go on and on forever.
Exactly, and so in getting back to Ms. Crawford, the person she quoted, Edward R. Murrow, was one of the people that finally called out McCarthy when he went on the I forget what his show was called. He had a nighttime show, but he called one of the few journalists that called out, because McCarthy had the same way Trump's going to say, if I published my pamphlet today, Trump would say I'm not patriotic, I'm anti-American. That's the same thing McCarthy accused the journalists that attacked him, being communist and communist sympathizers. So it goes on and on and on. But the problem today is I don't see any strong people, and even the people who I watch from Heaven or Hell, who are anti-Trump, are not really strong and not really banging the table, demanding that he's trying to institute fascist type things. I heard one of the commentators the other day, that Chris Matthews, he was on a panel discussion, and the woman I do remember, her name's Joy Reid, and she was attacking Trump's attack on freedom of the press. And Chris Matthews said, well, you don't give him anything. I give him something. Sometimes it's 50-50. It's not 50-50.
No.
If you lie, it's not 50-50.
It's a lie.
If you want to institute fascism in this country, it's not 50. You got to call it up. You got to keep calling it out. You got to stand it. Otherwise, we're all doomed.
Well, I want to tell you something. It's when I was a kid, I remember my father saying, you can count on a thief to steal, you can count on a liar to lie. That's just the name of the game. So welcome to my world, media. You finally have decided to call this man a liar. But guess what? Let's get beyond that. Let's talk about the policies. What has he done? He's got the media running around chasing non-stories. When he talks about the crowd size, he talks about that, I was there and I looked out and I saw millions of people, and it was larger than President Obama's, and it was larger than our inauguration, and it was larger than the women's demonstration.
Also delusional.
He's delusional, yes.
May I point out a couple of things? Mr. Paine, you used the word objective about the media. I mean, the news media must be objective. I have trouble with that. Either racism is bad or it is not bad. And you try to get both sides of the story. Excuse me. And climate change is a genuine thing, or it is not a genuine thing. And the scientific data shows that it is a genuine thing, and you can't have some person saying is not occurring.
Science isn't real.
No, facts are facts.
My point, my point, sir, is, Ms. Wells, Mr. Paine, is that the idea of objectivity is like what
No.
you call namby-pamby. Either a thing
No,
is or it's
objectivity means the facts are the facts, not presenting false facts or alternative facts to fit
You're
your.
talking about investigating
Right,
before you
not,
publish.
right, not having false facts to back up your preconceived notion of what you want to do. So a false fact would be, right, reporting in the paper that Trump has a executive order about Muslim immigrants to protect the people against terrorists coming into the country. Well, the objective reporting would be, no, that's false. The EO is not true because the countries that are under the
Under the ban.
under the banner of that executive order to come in, no terrorists came from those countries. The
At least
terrorists
not
come
for
from other
9/11.
countries. So that when I say objective reporting, that's what I mean. The facts are the facts. What a lot of newspapers do and a lot of the media do, they fit what they perceive to be the facts to the preconceived story that they want to move on to the public. So if you want to look at Hillary Clinton and keep attacking Benghazi and say 4 people died at Benghazi,
Right.
then you can keep doing that. But that's not objective
But if you
reporting.
don't say
The objective
65
reporting
died
is
under Bush.
what Babette said early on about all the other embassies where people were killed under
another
administrations. That's what I mean by objective reporting.
That's another point.
It's even worse than that. I mean, we, for instance, in this state, as people might know, we elect our judges. We're going to elect judges very soon, this spring and in the fall. I challenge the media to give voters the information they need in order to decide who they're going to vote for. Our major paper here, The Inquirer, doesn't do that until the last day, sometimes. And then, the day after Election Day, they complain that the public doesn't vote. Well, if the public doesn't have any information from our leading paper, what the heck do they expect?
And that's exactly what I took, because that's subjective reporting. Because they know if they don't report all the judges that have the party the endorsements and they're listed right on the ballot are the ones that are going to win. So that's what I mean by subjective reporting. Objective reporting is to put out the credentials of all the judges early on and let the public make their decision.
But I want to say something that's
Lazy.
interesting.
They're lazy.
But that's interesting when you start
It
talking
doesn't
about
sell
judges.
also.
When you start talking
Too
about
bad.
judges, because right
Well, I
now,
don't care, but they care.
But because right now, what's going on? If you recall, the Congress held up, even holding hearings on President Obama's nominee for the Supreme Court. They held it up. They said they wanted to wait until the next president came in place, which also makes me, who I'm prone to have these issues about conspiracy, because I'm looking at, they knew to put that clause in the defense budget to make the president have charge over Voices of America, and they also knew to hold up they knew what the outcome of the election was going to be, so they didn't want to even have a hearing for President Obama's.
Garland.
Yes, they didn't want to hear anything about that. Now, what makes it interesting to me is that we had there was a confirmation hearing for a Supreme Court nominee. And he used the term, well, he said, because it was a very contentious hearing. Went on for a few days. I remember thinking that I was going to watch the first 15 minutes and go about my business, and I couldn't. I was just glued to the TV set for the entire weekend. And that was a confirmation of Uncle Thomas. I'm sorry, I can't
I'm
think.
glad you did it.
Clarence Thomas, I can't call him anything else. And he used the term, well, I didn't watch the testimony of the people that were testifying against me because this is nothing but a high-tech lynching. Ms. Wells, you as a person that put your life on the line to report lynching, how dare the likes of a Clarence Thomas to dare compare the hearing for confirmation to lynching?
The audacity.
Yeah.
Is the first word to come to my head, because you are comparing something that there's evidence you did.
You mean there's evidence that he did what he was accused of?
That he did what he was accused of, which is why he, didn't watch anybody else's testimonies. But it's how dare you compare this to a lynching? Do you know what a lynching is? Do you know how lynchings happen? Lynchings primarily happen to innocent men and women just because of hate. This wasn't hate that he was going through. This was his character was being tested, and he didn't like that. So he wanted to make America feel like he is being attacked.
He invoked an image that he knew.
That he invoked this image that America is just, that he's a black man, and that we're just attacking him because he's a black man, and we don't want him to succeed, and we don't want him, like, how dare you say this is a high-tech lynching, especially on whose seat?
Oh my gosh, please.
He was about to sit in.
Thurgood Marshall.
Like, Thurgood Marshall. I just couldn't believe it.
I watched men in my community be dragged out of their homes, out of their businesses, and hung up from a tree. And you want to compare this to that?
Or how he just sits there in a row.
Well, he did do something.
Republicans, with the help of the press,
yes,
did a job on our nominee, Hillary Clinton, and people believed them. Yeah. They watched this Benghazi thing and they had no idea that 4 people compared to 65, it's all a tragedy, but 65 people, every single time she opened her mouth, it was a scandal. There was Whitewater, there was I'm not gonna bake cookies, there was, oh my God, she went to help children, I guess she's running a child sex ring. And nobody challenged it. Nobody. The Democrats didn't. I fault the Democrats. I didn't. I fault myself.
Yes, I would agree. The news media has fallen into sensationalism, and what is supposed to be news has turned into entertainment. And plus, the resources for information, newspapers, have been extremely limited. When I started out in New York, there were just in New York, there were dozens of newspapers operate, dailies and weeklies. Now you have, in the major cities, you have just one or maybe two dailies and some alternative weeklies. And this one newspaper can't supply all of your information. We must go back to when there are several newspapers in one city.
Competing, and therefore you have an opportunity,
but that's not,
more of an opportunity for
that's not going to happen. So the competition has to reside with the cable and network TVs.
And the internet.
And as long as they're part of the entertainment package that these networks measure their profits and losses by, you'll never get objective journalism from them. So the real clue, because we're never going to get 6 or 7 newspapers as your city had back in the time that you were publishing, or even when Philadelphia had 3 or 4. What we have to have is independent news organizations on cable TV and network TV, and they have to be separate from the entertainment divisions of those networks, and they have to be nonprofit. In fact, there's a couple journalists now engaged engaged in forming nonprofits. One guy's in Texas and one guy's in Nevada. They're forming nonprofit media outlets, and it's going to only focus on government, especially the state governments they're in. And that's what we need to see, that type of, it's nonprofit, they're not looking for ratings, They're looking to expose corruption and inform the people about what's going on in their government. Now, one is, I forget, one guy used to work for the one of the Dallas papers, and the other guy is an editor of a Las Vegas paper. But they're doing these non-profits, and that's what has to happen.